Okay, I'll get started. Wow, thank you. It's wonderful to see so many people here, particularly to see so many students with us tonight. And I know we have several people that have been able to come from our senior administration at Acadia as well. We thank you for being here for this important conversation. I also see some community members as well, and thank you for coming out to this event. I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging that we are gathered in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And, you know, it's vital when we're having conversations about equity, diversity, and inclusion that we show gratitude for the Mi'kmaq people, for their care and teaching about this land that our beautiful campus sits on. My name is Randy Lynn Newman. Many of you know me. I'm a professor here in the psychology department at Acadia. And tonight's event is being organized by the Acadia University Faculty Association Women's Committee with support from a number of groups across campus. And tonight we're here to recognize International Women's Day, which is on Thursday. And the theme for this year's International Women's Day is Press for Progress. And tonight we're going to have what I know will be an impactful and inspiring conversation about why diversity matters and why we must continue to press for progress on issues related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, not only in our classrooms and on our campus, but also in our communities and in our workplaces. Tonight's panelists are not only highly respected in their fields, they are widely acknowledged regionally and nationally as diversity thought leaders. And we are grateful, I'm particularly grateful that you were able to be with us tonight. And it's my pleasure to introduce each of the panelists. I'll start with Denise Pothier. Denise is Vice President of Practice Services at Stantec. And she's the first ever Vice President of Indigenous Relations at Stantec. Denise has a background in chemical engineering and more than 20 years of industry experience in the oil and gas sector, working in regulatory compliance, quality assurance, management systems, process engineering, risk assessment. And for the last 10 years, she has played a pivotal role in the development of Stantec's Diversity and Inclusion Council, which she serves on. She sits on the board of directors of Techsploration and the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, and I know she gets invited to participate in panels like tonight quite frequently. Denise is a champion for marginalized groups and a passionate volunteer in her community. Seated next to Denise, we have Ulrike Bahr-Gedalia. With a career spanning 5 geographic regions, Ulrike is a multilingual, award-winning entrepreneur and innovator with over 20 years of experience within the information and communications technology sector. She's held senior roles at prominent multinational high-tech corporations as well as startups. She's currently the president and CEO of Digital Nova Scotia, and she has led that organization, which is the Industry Association for Nova Scotia's digital technology sector, to new heights, resulting in unprecedented growth in our region and increasing its national visibility. In recognition for her leadership and for her lifelong advocacy for diversity and inclusion, she has received numerous awards and is regularly featured as an inspiring role model for youth, women, and immigrants in STEAM in particularly. For the last 3 consecutive years, she has been named one of Canada's most powerful women by the Women's Executive Network. She's also been honored with the RBC Top 25 Canadian Immigrant Award, the Atlantic Business Magazine's Top 50 CEO Award, and the Progress Women of Excellence Award. She's also one of the 150 Canadian female leaders in STEAM, which was featured in a newly released Canada 150 Women Conversations with Leaders, Champions, and Luminaries. She's on a number of boards, the International Women's Forum, industry advisory boards within the Dalhousie Faculty of Computer Science and the St. Mary's School of Business. She's a board director with the Information and Communications Technology Council based out of Ottawa, being the first East Coast representative. since the Council's inception. And she's recently joined the Board of Directors with Skills Canada Nova Scotia. And we have Dr. Tamara Franz-Odendaal. She's a professor of biology at Mount St. Vincent University. She is a developmental biologist and anatomist. She is the NSERC Chair for Women in Science and Engineering. This is a position she's held for the Atlantic region since 2011. Her program, WISE Atlantic, which has been a very strong supporter of our WISE Acadia group, aims to shift gendered STEM stereotypes by empowering girls to consider STEM-based careers by raising the awareness of the diversity of jobs in these fields and enabling them to visualize working in the fields themselves. WISE Atlantic supports women in STEM through professional development opportunities, as well as hosting WinSet leadership program workshops. The work that Tamara has done has reached over 13,000 students, teachers, and academics and professionals. We're reaching over 100 more today. She has helped organize the 2012 Canadian Coalition of Women in Engineering, Science, Trades, and Technology Conference, and she now sits on that board as well. And like all of the panelists here, she is called upon to provide expert opinion about women in STEM and has served on countless panels, committees, and boards. In 2015, she received the Mounts Research Excellence Award for outstanding contributions to the research community and research climate at Mount St. Vincent. And Dr. Imogen is the founding dean of the Faculty of Science at Ryerson University, where she is also a professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biology. She is an affiliate scientist in the Li Ka-shing Knowledge Institute Keenan Research Center at St. Michael's Hospital, where her research group studies the biology of drug transport proteins, which facilitate the entry into cells of drugs used in the treatment of cancer, viral infections, and parasitic infections. Dr. Ko is internationally recognized as an advocate for the engagement, retention, recruitment, and promotion of girls and women in STEM. As a Canadian thought leader in this area, she has advised academia, government, and industry on best practices to increase equity, diversity, and inclusion in science, technology, engineering, and math. She has written extensively about these issues in publications such as the Globe and Mail, iPolitics, and the Huffington Post. She's a TEDx speaker and has been invited to give numerous talks to academia, industry, and government. And tonight she's with us. She has also been recognized by the Women's Executive Network as one of Canada's top 100 women in the Trailblazer category for her advocacy work promoting equity in STEM. And in 2017, she was also named one of Canada's 150 women in the best-selling publication of the same name. So as you can see, we really do have an outstanding group of panelists with us this evening to lead this very important discussion. And without further ado, we'll begin our panel. And I have a few students as well as a postdoctoral fellow at Acadia who are going to ask some of the questions this evening. Of course. Yeah, of course. Okay, Kylie, thank you.
Hi everyone, so my name is Kylie, as Randy mentioned. I'm a fourth-year student here at Acadia with a double major in biology and psychology. And after my next degree, hopefully, I'd like to start a career in academia. And so to start us off today, I'd like to ask, what does diversity in STEM mean to you, and why does it matter?
We can start with Imogen.
So that's a great question, and thank you for standing up in front of everybody and asking that. And thank you for the opportunity to come and visit Acadia. It's my first visit to Acadia. So diversity in STEM covers a whole multitude of levels. So the diversity of the disciplines, and a double major in biology and psychology, there's diversity there. Diversity of participants, diversity of contributors, diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives, and diversity inherent in human activities, human endeavors, that we want to be sure that we are capturing all of the talent out there including all of the diversity in all of the disciplines that we are pursuing in terms of trying to understand the world around us. So.
Great. So to me, I think our STEM workforce should be representing Canada's demographic, and everyone should have equal opportunity to succeed in whichever sector they choose. Right now, because of inequalities in our system, that's not possible for every type of individual. So that's what diversity in STEM needs to be. The second part of the question was...
You can, sure, absolutely.
Why does it matter? And I think, to me, it matters because not only does it make the world a better place to be including everyone, but it really does lead to innovation and economic growth.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to comment. I would like to actually refer to my own team. So Digital Nova Scotia started with me, and now I have a team of 4 from 4 different countries. And I've done this very deliberately for the mere reason that I come from a background, Randy had introduced me, where I worked in highly diverse places and environments, and I saw the success in terms of problem solving, different perspectives, and challenging me on my own perspective. And together we came to a far more improved and better outcome in any country and company. And I always believe if you have a more diverse team, you have a more diverse organization, your nation will be more diverse and more successful, and you can lead by example for the rest of the world. So in my case, Digital Nova Scotia, I chose, we have somebody from the UK, from China, and myself, I'm German-Israeli, and I call our colleague Tyler the local plant from Cape Breton because we need some roots here, and he has been wonderfully connecting us to industries, communities, and so forth. So I live and breathe diversity. My husband is Israeli, my kids were born in different countries, and I feel it's an enrichment, it's fulfilling, it makes your life, your work, your outcome richer. For example, if I may comment on IT, it's very easy to grasp that diversification in features and products is what any company wants to do, and diversification in markets, because it grows the company's revenue, their success, their recognition. Therefore, diversity in people needs to grow equally. If you enter a new market, you need people who can serve that market. And it is in IT or in STEM. You enter a new market, it doesn't have to be geographically. It could be a market in terms of a sector. You need people who are able to address it. Or let me give you an example from the automotive industry that's very technical as well. If you have, say, a group of people develop airbags, as it happened, and it might be only men developing it, that's not going to work for females who will also be exposed to airbags, because we often develop products not bearing in mind the target audience and end user. So going back to 4 people on my team representing diversity, and I encourage more diversity in my team and sector because I believe it makes a better world and better products and outcomes. Thanks.
I'm not sure if it's easier going first or last here, but I certainly agree with all of the comments that have been shared here. And what I would add to that, and it may be viewed as a very simplistic view, but it is my view on diversity and its importance, is if habit is viewed as the great deadener, then diversity must be the great awakener. And in order for us to break free of our habits and routines and just plodding along the way we've always done things, then we need diversity to infuse that creativity and innovation that is required in STEM, in research, and in engineering.
Thank you very much. I believe Amy is sitting next here to Kylie.
Hi, my name's Amy Prescott. I'm the Y student president here at Acadia, and I'm also a 4th year in biology, and after this I'm interested in medicine. So my question is, what do you say in support for those who fight for equity, diversity, and inclusion when they meet resistance from individuals who believe that equity means sacrificing excellence? What do you say to these people when you meet them?
Maybe we would start with Tamara this time. We'll take turns so no one is immune to going first or last.
So when we are facing those who are fighting, who are opposing equity and diversity and inclusion, we need to remember that we are still, when we're going into hiring, for example, we are still hiring the most qualified, skilled person. And I think we need to remember and appreciate the value that diversity brings to a team, as has already been mentioned, the different perspectives, the different approaches, the different points of view, which enables us then to reach a different demographic. If you look at the statistics, or you just look at our classrooms have become more diverse in many fields, not in all of them as much as we would like, but our faculty diversity has not increased. And we really need to start looking at the hiring process, and that system is set up for the white male to succeed. And that's where we need to start making some changes.
Ulrike.
Yeah, for me, I always, when people challenge me and on this topic, I really like to have a deeper conversation, ask why, because I try to understand where they're coming from and what their reasoning might be. It could be due to experience, it could be simply due to a fear or misunderstanding of what this diversity might mean. I do have conversations, for example, with companies in the IT sector, and they share with me that they do have some challenges growing the team and the business, and they do seem to hire, and they admit to it, primarily friends and family, because that's what they feel comfortable with. And that's a very important conversation to be had, because then I'm asking, why do you feel more comfortable, and why aren't you successful because of that comfort zone of hiring friends and family who might not be qualified. And during these conversations and giving examples of other companies who have been very successful and happily have engaged with a highly diverse workforce in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, to have this conversation together and talk about the successes and benefits. But it's important, I always find, to ask why, because a lot of people don't have malicious intentions. I think they're misinformed, they're fearful for a lot of reasons that need to be sometimes a little bit investigated, and I do provoke almost a conversation to understand where it's coming from. I've been successful, thankfully, in many ways of convincing companies to then actually, and you had mentioned the hiring structure and how we hiring practices, to invite more diversity, and more diversity attracts again more diversity. So it's really like a snowball effect. And I would like to actually, in terms of hiring practices, what we sometimes face is there is a big issue here in terms of if you're not hiring people due to their gender, race, or even age, despite their experiences and skills and talents, that is the big issue. And I often explain it to companies I speak with and individuals. The talent, experience, everything is there. What's holding you back? But again, this conversation is important, and I feel I need to lead by example. I need to walk the talk, meaning by my team, in terms of my team, in terms of my board. I have 17 board directors. It might be a big board, but it's highly diverse. And I always encourage more diversity in the conversations, but I feel I need to live it myself for others to say, well, Ulrike, you're not just talking. And I just believe in it because I've been growing up and living my life like this, and I've been seeing all the benefits. So ask questions in order to take away fear and inform people, and they'll inform others. And it's a very important dialogue to have.
Denise.
Yeah, those are great responses, and just to build on what's been shared here in terms of looking at the recruitment or promotion process, you know, we need to delineate identity with merit, and we need to hire on merit, but I think that's often masked because we are hiring on identity because of the unconscious biases that we hold. So I think to echo the thoughts that have been shared here around challenging ourselves and looking at the unconscious biases that we hold, and really looking beyond identity and truly looking at merit. What are the qualifications that are required for this position, and not tailoring them for specific individuals because they look like ourselves or sound like ourselves. And that's a that's a big challenge. And I think it really starts with that inward, looking at what unconscious biases are you holding that are influencing your decisions.
Thank you. Imogen.
So I wrote a piece called Excellence and Equity Are Mutually Conducive in response to an article that Margaret Wente wrote in the Globe and Mail. It was just another Saturday, and it was just another ridiculous article she wrote. So you can read that, just Google that, or go to my website. So there are a couple of things that really, I echo what the other panelists have said, which are our narrow framing of what excellence is, what excellence constitutes, how we have defined that and how narrowly that may have been defined depending on the field that you're talking about. And the fact that if we're truly seeking excellence, then we need to be seeking out all the talent that's available. And if we're not, for instance, in hiring, casting nets as wide as we can, and we're not actually going out in ways that don't conform to this very narrow idea of how you seek out excellence, then we're absolutely, certainly missing it. There is no doubt that we are missing it. And there's tons of data and many studies that support that. So this idea that one of these, that the equity compromises excellence is absolutely a falsehood. There's no doubt about that. And I think what Ulrike said is very, it's very important that that there is something about an anxiety that comes out in certain people around this idea of there being a compromise that reflects on their own sort of perhaps insecurities. So if people are worried perhaps that they didn't achieve something on the basis of merit, but they maybe did achieve it on the basis of color, gender, ethnicity, age, whatever, then there might be a sense of being threatened by the idea that actually if we go out and truly look at the entire diversity that we have in humanity and seek excellence, maybe they wouldn't actually be where they are. So I think there's a little bit of that going on, and we need to be honest about that conversation because it does discomfort people. And we need to be sort of empathetic about that, but we also need to be honest about the fact that we have a narrow view of excellence, and we have it's a falsehood to think that those two things compromise each other any more than being over 6 feet tall and named John automatically qualifies you to be a CEO of a top 500 company in the US. And yet we see a disproportionate number of tall white men named John as CEOs. So obviously there's something else going on, right? So I think we need to be having those conversations, but truly if we're looking for excellence, we have to be casting the net really wide.
Yeah, I have to wonder what discovery are we delaying, right?
There's a great quote by an American educationalist called Myra Sadker, who died sadly early of breast cancer, but she was a great proponent for girls' education, particularly marginalized girls. And she said, if the cure for cancer is in the mind of a girl, we may never find it.
Yeah.
And that's, if there's one of the solutions for climate change or dealing with climate change in the Arctic is in the mind of a First Nations student, we're going to be really hard-pressed to find it because we are not including the diversity, the richness of humanity that we have in our activities, in our endeavors, in our science, technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Sarah, where's Sarah sitting? You're over here. I think Sarah's question actually gets at some of what some people think is behind these issues.
So hello, so my name is Sarah Klapstein, so I'm a postdoc here at Acadia in the Earth and Environmental Science program. So to follow up on some of the discussion we were just having, my question is that, so rates of gender diversity vary across STEM disciplines. For instance, we see a high percentage of women in medicine and in fields like biology, nutrition, and psychology. However, large gender gaps persist in engineering, physics, and computer science. Some individuals attribute these gender gaps to interests. Boys are interested in things, girls are interested in people, but is it really that simple? If not, what are the most significant factors that you see as contributing to gender gaps in STEM?
Maybe we'll start with you, Ulrike.
Oh, thank you.
If that's okay.
Thanks for raising that question. Yeah, it is not that simple. It's a generalization, clearly. I have a son and a daughter, and my daughter is interested in sciences. So, boy, here we have trouble already. It doesn't really align with what clearly is being out there or being perceived as what should be out there. It really starts all at home. I said it starts in your own backyard. It's your education, how you motivate and inspire your own children. And they look at you as a role model. Are you leading by example? Are you contradicting what you tell them and with your own actions? And so for my son and daughter, it was always follow your passion, whatever you're good at, whatever you're interested in, because if you're passionate about something, you'll be good at it. You enjoy it. That's where the success. And it doesn't matter if it is dancing, if it is building, if it is coding. I always say the sky is not even the limit, maybe the universe. It's just all opportunities are out there, but it's that conversation that one needs to have with the children and support it. Now we are surrounded, and again, clearly you can hear I'm not from North America. So growing up in Germany, I played with a lot of Lego. My friends from Denmark were next door. That's where the Legos come from. And they had very basic colors. It was the green, blue, black, white, and so forth. Beautiful. We all played with it. I moved to the United States for a year after high school and found everything in pink, and it was divided. You turn left for the girls, and then you turn right for the boys, and it continued with the clothing. What I'm explaining or trying to explain here is then a different culture comes in. So depending on where you grow up, it is really different. It's not a global conversation in terms of everything is the same, whether in Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Israel, Canada, and so forth. And I noticed it when we moved here 16 years ago. My husband and I, it's very different from our own upbringing, and it seems to be very gender divided or focused, very different from how I grew up. So we are now surrounded by all this, and as parents have a responsibility as teachers, even on the sports teams, in order to ensure to keep an open mind and support the kids in whatever and with whatever they want to do. So they believe they're awesome. They need to believe in themselves so they can do it, and we need to support it. But I think it's our role as role models all along. And yes, we can't avoid media. There's a lot of interesting social media. There are video games. I really challenge the IT companies I work with on and explain to them that the characters, the female characters, are very unrealistic. They have nothing smart to say, and I want this to be changed because we are bright females. We don't look the way they look in these certain video games, and it's just not the reality. So, but it's the games the kids play, and they get influenced by it. It's the same if you see advertisement. How are women featured? Do you see the doctor or engineer, or do you see the lady with the wipers sweeping the windows? This is all where it starts. And I do challenge my kids, and I say, what do you see? And they say, again, I see the female doing this and the man doing this. So that awareness, but challenge the dialogue from early on, kindergarten. This is important, and then keep the dialogue going. We can't affect what's out there already, but I think we can teach the children to be critical thinkers and say, this is not you, it's maybe what the media puts out there. You're different. Just think, follow your passion, and but be critical, and then also receive constructive criticism yourself really well. So that's my feedback.
Yeah, thank you. Denise?
We would have been great parents together. Everything Ulrike said, ditto. And I love you bringing in the pink Legos versus what I'm going to call the traditional Legos. I can always recall going, not naming names, of course, but being offered a girl or a boy toy, perhaps in association with a children's meal. And I responded that I wanted the car, and the response came back, oh, you want the boy toy? And I said, no, I want the car. The boy toy, the car. And finally the person understood that my daughter wanted the car. And for them to suggest that it was a boy toy was not appropriate. So I do thank you for bringing that example up. The media is horrific as well. I'll just put that out there. The way that we are portraying women and portraying women even in leadership roles as bossy or not easy to get along with and things of that nature. And the answer is it isn't as simple as boys like this and girls like that. I'm sitting here, I'm a female who's studied chemical engineering. So, and there's really no good reason for me to have gone into engineering. I had a very traditional upbringing. Dad's a carpenter, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I grew up in very rural Nova Scotia, so there wasn't an engineer to be seen. But I had a chemistry teacher who just saw some potential throughout engineering as an option, and my mom, who's not an engineer, supported that decision. So I'm very thankful for that when I think back as to what was the first domino that got me onto this career path. And at that time, we didn't have a lot of dialogue about girls do this and boys do that. And in a way, I'm thankful that didn't exist. I didn't think about there was any reason why I shouldn't go into engineering. I do think there is an opportunity to change the dialogue, not just to talk about the math and the science and the physics around engineering. It's around making the world a better place and how engineering truly is a social science where we're protecting rivers and bringing emergency services to remote communities and building resilient infrastructures and whatnot. So I think that there is an opportunity to change the dialogue there, to broaden who engineering would appeal to, engineering in particular.
Yes, so you talk about the cultural conditioning, and this is the subject of my TEDx talk. So from the moment we're born, a little baby girl or a baby boy wrapped in a pink blanket or a blue blanket, we are drenched in cultural conditioning, whether it be parents, teachers, media. I think media and marketing are absolutely complicit. I think it is horrific. I think we should hold them accountable, as they are in some other parts of the world where advertisers now have requirements around not gender stereotyping toys or children, and we are framed in the cultural expectations of our community, of our culture, of our location, the expectations of a family, expectations of a region, or expectations of a country. And those things are very, very powerful and very, very pervasive. Gender stereotyping disenfranchises boys as much as it disenfranchises girls. And it's really, really important that the dialogue extend to the fact that we don't let kids be kids. So not only are the numbers out of balance for things like physics and computer science, but they're out of balance for things like fine arts and nursing. Yeah. And that's not okay either, because boys are compassionate. Anybody that's, I have a son and a daughter, boys are compassionate and caring, and those are the kinds of men that we want them to grow up to be. And yet they are as culturally stereotyped as girls are culturally stereotyped not to love math and science. So we really have to be very aware of the stereotyping that limits the potential for our young people, for our children, for our young people, and the way that it impacts our young women, which is to limit their ability to contribute or participate in things that they might love. Computer science is a really interesting example because women were enrolling in computer science majors in American colleges and universities at the same rate, and those rates were increasing at the same rate of increase as medicine and law. There's a great book, podcast, NPR podcast called When Women Stopped Coding. Because if you actually track the enrollment of women in majors in computer science, medicine and law continued to go up from the 1970s through to the 90s and beyond until it's about a 50% rate of enrollment relative to men. Computer science was on the same trajectory until the early 80s, and then it crashed. The numbers of women enrolled in computer science crashed in the US, and they have hovered around about 20% since then in Canada as well. And one of the interpretations of those data is that the early 1980s was when the PC was introduced. And the PC was marketed as a toy for boys. And if you look at adverts and you look at Radio Shack and you look at companies that were actually selling PCs, they picked a marketing approach that said, we're going to sell this, we're going to get this into homes as much as we can by marketing it for boys. And it became the narrative. It became the computer geek. It became the guy who plays video games in the basement. If you look at other parts of the world where the culture and the context is different, you will see that rates of engagement are also different. So we are very much influenced by culture and context. We need to, again, be honest about that, bring all of that on the table. Tons of studies, lots of data in support of those things. And remember that we're talking about human potential, not just girls and boys. We're talking about human potential and the fact that gender stereotyping and cultural conditioning limits human potential.
Thank you. Tamara.
Great, thanks. I echo everything that has been said. So I'll just bring up a couple of maybe different things. So I just want to go back to the role that parents play in shaping interests. There was a survey done by Actua, which is a national not-for-profit organization, that showed that parents were 3 times more likely to put their boy in a digital literacy camp than a girl. So that tells us already that both mothers and fathers are shaping the interests of boys and girls differently. One of the things we try to do in my program, Wise Atlantic, is to showcase to girls the other options the other options they can do when they are good at math and science. So if you ask girls who are good in math and science, most of them are opting to go into medicine, where we have 80% women. So what we're trying to do is showcase how socially responsible some other careers that use science and math and physics are for the communities, so like engineering and IT. I also want to touch on teachers. So teachers also play a huge role in shaping the interests of students. And most of our elementary school teachers are female, and many of our elementary school teachers have a math phobia. That math phobia gets passed on to the students in the class. My daughter, when she was in grade 3, that's when she first came home and said the boys in the class say girls shouldn't be good at math. So it came from somewhere. The teacher did not stop it. It perpetuated. And if that continues to happen, then girls who are not surrounded by other supportive systems are going to start believing that that is true. So we really need to spend some more time, and I think a lot of time, educating our teachers. So our teachers all do diversity and inclusion as part of their B.Ed program. But they do it in a very, they do one course at one time in their program. And I think we really should be focusing and having dedicated conversations about diversity within some of these sectors where we are really not doing well. So conversations about diversity in STEM with our teachers. Our teachers do not know all the myriad of opportunities there are with a science, technology, engineering, or math background. They do not know what they are, and I think it's our role as professionals in these fields to really start talking to the teachers and telling them these are all the cool things that you can do with an engineering degree or a science degree and how you can help society. Helping society is something that's very appealing to a female student, to girls. They really want to help society. They want to work in teams. But the stereotypes are so strong. The stereotypes are telling them that being an IT professional is not teamwork. You don't meet people. You're sitting at your computer. And that's not what it is like in reality. Mm-hmm. And we need to educate our teachers so they are giving those messages to the girls and the boys in the classroom. And I think we really need to spend some time looking at our B.Ed programs and how we teach teachers.
You talk about the influence of stereotypes, and I know there's a lot of students here from my class. We have a class through the Women and Gender Studies program in psychology called Women in Science, talking about so many of the issues we're talking about today. And the students just passed in an assignment. It was a stereotype artifact assignment, and they had to write a reflection on it, and I'm going through them. And it's shocking how pervasive they are in books and in media. You know, they're sending me clips of television shows, very popular television shows. You know, there was a book, Barbie is a software engineer. I don't know if any of you have read this book where Barbie, it starts out really positively that Barbie can be a software engineer. But then Barbie runs into some challenges with her programming. And what does Barbie do when she runs into challenges with her program? She asks Ken. Yeah. Right? Not her girlfriend, not to work together. And so this is, this is an example of what one, and the students in the class are also, and I think what you said is so important is that I care as much about the harmful stereotypes that exist for boys as well. And so a number of students in the class have also looked at those types of stereotypes that may lead boys away from certain types of careers. Because I think these stereotypes, there's research to show that these stereotypes are shaping these differences in interests. Absolutely. They're absolutely, and you talked about kindergarten. And we looked at a study in class that I think was really quite powerful in showing that at the age of 5, if you ask girls and boys who is really, really smart and who is really, really nice, they tend to pick their own gender. And that's very normal. You're egocentric at 5. And at the age of 6, the girls and the boys were now choosing the really, really smart person as a man, even though the girls themselves were very self-aware that the girls in their classroom were often the smartest, So, and of course, the girls were being judged as really, really nice. But what was so important, it wasn't just that those stereotypes that they were starting to internalize, it was how it impacted them later. And when they had them choose a board game that was described as really, really hard, and the other was described as, I don't know if anyone remembers, it was just fun or something. The girls stayed away at age 6 from the really, really hard board game, right? Because it impacted them. And so I say all the time, this idea of girls staying away from disciplines like physics and computer science and math, engineering is another one. These are careers that have been stereotyped as for brilliant people, right? And there's research to show that. And so if we have these stereotypes, girls who are internalizing what they can and can't do are now staying away from those. And so, so much of what you said is echoing back to what the research is telling us. This isn't just anecdotes this is what the research is telling us.
So there's significant social costs to being a really smart girl. And so that's a challenge, is that so the girls know that they're really smart, but there is a social cost associated with being a really smart girl, which leads to a sort of a cognitive dissonance and a sense of, where do I fit in? How can I belong? How can I be really, really smart and also fit into the stereotype of girls suck at math or whatever it is? There's some brilliant work by somebody called Eden Hennessy from Wilfrid Laurier University, who she's a social psychologist, and she looks at the social costs of challenging stereotypes, particularly for women in STEM. So a scientist is seen as being competent. Women are stereotypes of being warm. And you can't, if you're a woman in STEM, then you challenge stereotypes on 2 levels. And so it becomes a challenge and a disincentive to be part of that community or part of that profession.
Yes, and I know students in the class have shared stories very much like that, where they almost felt that they had to feign how smart they were when they answered questions in class so that they didn't have that attached to them. Right. Yeah. Anya. Where's Anya? Oh, Anya's just back there.
My name is Anya Friesen. I'm the Vice President of Y Students Acadia, and I'm a second-year electrical engineering student, and I plan on merging that into biomedical and biomechanical engineering in the future. And the question that I have for the panel is, what is one piece of advice that you have for students and postdoctoral students who desire a career in STEM, particularly in areas where we see large diversity gaps, such as engineering?
Denise?
It's with me. Okay. Number 1 now. And my initial reaction for a response for that question was, go for it. Like it's as simple as that, yet it's as complicated as that as well. So once you've made that decision, that you've owned the space and that you will go for it. I would suggest that you find like-minded people. You find others, no matter if they're in your exact field or not, but like-minded people that will support you in what you do and be good mentors for you. And then just provide that network that you may need to be successful, because there will be some dark moments where there is some self-doubt that may creep in, or an imposter syndrome that may creep in, and that you need to rely on that network. And so to not be afraid to reach out. We're all human beings, and that means we like to be connected. So find those people that you can connect with and stay close to them throughout your career, and they will provide that I'm going to call it perhaps safety net is the term I'm going to use for that. But just in a nutshell, it's go for it.
Absolutely.
So I might give about 3.
That's okay.
Build your network. So specifically for young women in STEM or marginalized communities, it's not just a gender issue. It could be somebody from an underrepresented group, young men of color, First Nations, people with disabilities. Build your network is absolutely critical, and surround yourself with people that support you and affirm you. Resilience is massively important, and it's a skill that we need to really help develop in our young people, our young women. And the one piece of advice that I routinely give to young women who are going to pursue a career or want to pursue a career is pick your partner carefully. And some people laugh at that. But the reality is that in a culture where women still carry more of the burden for things like childcare, elder care, home care, that kind of thing. If you are going to, if you're aspiring to all of those things like family or partnerships or children or whatever, you want to be with somebody who is a team player. And so that means somebody who will support you in your pathway, your career choice, whatever that may be. And that's not specific to STEM, but I do think it's specific to young women who have career aspirations. And there are lots of good people out there who want to be team partners in a journey, in a life journey. But I have seen many situations where young people with aspirations have been, particularly young women, have been overburdened by the responsibilities that come from an unequal kind of society that we live in. So it's very difficult to be the person that has the predominant care of children, the predominant care of elderly parents. It feels responsible for keeping a house clean or whatever, the things that I don't worry about. I don't do. Because, pick your priorities as well. Because because it needs to be an equal partnership. And we don't live in a society that's equal yet, so make sure you pick somebody who will treat you equally. Or don't pick anyone at all. Get a dog. That's just as good.
Excellent. Tamara.
So my advice, some of them have already been taken, so I've got another one. So I would say speak up and use your voice and have confidence and believe that your opinion does matter. It does matter. I met a computer scientist who was a panelist at one of our goals events a few days ago, and she was telling me she was at her new job, but she's only been there a couple of months, and she's only female in the team, and they were brainstorming ideas, and she was being quiet. She was being overshadowed by all the other voices, so she didn't say anything. But her boss, who was very supportive of her, said, Ravi, what do you think? What is your opinion? And so she shared her opinion, and her opinion ended up being the best idea of the day. So really have confidence in yourself and speak up, because your opinion is really important. It can make a difference.
Thank you. Ulrike.
Yeah, my summary is basically that everything that was said is something that I had prepared in my own answers for you, but I, of course, would like to bring a new angle to it as well. Number one, though, I would like to emphasize, think Nova Scotia. I mean, clearly I'm an immigrant, and I learned networking and that was emphasized before. This is a very community-based, friend-based, family-based community. We do have more immigrants now, but get out there and network. For example, Digital Nova Scotia, we put on a tech lounge in the ICT sector at a pub at the Foggy Goggle. It's very informal. And I'm mentioning it because students, industry, everybody's coming along and speaks to one another and connects. However, the majority of students hides in a corner and needs to be encouraged and invited in order to speak actually to all these fabulous industry people who want to talk to you. So let's put it this way, future employers are not scary. They really want to have this conversation. So it's going back to the confidence as well, to get out of your home or your residence, your chair, and talk and introduce yourself. And they just want to have a very informal conversation. Are very interested in you because there is a shortage in ICT in particular in so many areas. So everyone is welcomed to have this conversation. The other thing is to meet people, like-minded people. Denise had mentioned, and what I recommend is I often make myself available and then also connect people with other individuals in the community, because it's important if you, once you start your career, to speak to somebody who has just started and is like a couple of years in the workforce. That's very different from somebody who has been there 10 to 15 years. And then someone like myself who's still around and loves it. So if you go through all these different conversations, you can see how everyone managed perhaps different challenges, even failures and problems differently. And we all found a solution in one or the other way, and we still love it and enjoy it. So STEM in itself is a very enjoyable field in terms of, we talked about problem solving, building, making a difference, whether it's health, whether it's building bridges, whether it's all kinds of beautiful games that we can build, video games, animation, and so forth. Cybersecurity, a very important topic as well. Now, I would like to point out, and this is something I often emphasize, and we talked about boys and girls, men and women. There are a lot of men, and I would like to really emphasize it. My biggest sponsors throughout my entire career were men. There are fabulous men out there. They often come to me and say, I would like to hire more females. Where are they? So there are employers and organizations who just welcome female talent. They had good experience. They would like to encourage more talk about gender diversity. And equally, and we should be honest about it, there are a lot of women who are not helpful. So don't get fooled by the fact that because she might be a woman, she will be supporting you. Unfortunately, we can be our own enemies or our own biggest obstacle in the female community. For me, it's all about, if I talk diversity, it's everybody. We focus on gender diversity, but it is really, there are a lot of fabulous people out there, regardless the gender. And to keep an open mind and know there are so many wonderful men who would want to work with people from all walks of life. So, and therefore I like that Imogen, right, do I say it properly, had brought up that it's equally challenging for boys and girls and men and women alike, because a lot of men even feel that they are now being at times discriminated against because they want to support women, but women perhaps perceive because they're men, there might be already some animosity or not the welcoming, but they're very welcoming in so many ways. To keep an open mind that actually everyone has perhaps good intentions, and we talked about unconscious bias, lots of studies that are out there and confirm the culture and environment, but there are a lot of good people and intentions out there, and not to forget about this goodness and greatness in everyone, and speak up and have that conversation, be vocal. So you have to be the conversation starter, and you will have a lot of positive feedback and experiences. And the ones that are not so positive, be resilient, just brush it off and move on, because there'll be another amazing conversation just around the corner.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, you brought up about sort of a work-life balance, and I find myself often having conversations with that, with female and sometimes male students as well, who feel already before they have graduated, before they're even in that situation, they're not married, they don't have children, where they're already struggling with this concept of how am I going to do both. And I will say, you know, I said this to someone yesterday, you have to choose your partner wisely, and I really do think that we can't underestimate the importance of that. And I think, you know, myself, I was in a department when I was having my first child. I was quite scared, but I was fortunate to be in a department where I was really supported. I was nervous to tell the head of my department because I was just hired. Now I'm going to go on maternity leave. And I was worried, and I walk into his office and I tell him, and he stands up and he's like, "This is wonderful, another baby in the department."
Yeah.
Right? And of course I had support from it. So I mean, it makes such a difference to have that kind of support. And in this case, you know, it was my male and my female colleagues, and so I think that's important to echo. Emma's over here. Oh, thanks, Anya. Thanks, Emma.
Hi, so my name's Emma. I'm a fourth-year biology honors student here at Acadia, and after my degree, I hope to continue a career in research. So our last question for you tonight is, what systematic changes need to occur within our schools, universities, and workplaces in order to achieve greater diversity in STEM? In a university like Acadia, where do we start and where do we continue to move on with the change?
Well, that's a tiny little question. Gosh, I could talk for hours and days and weeks on that. So I think it all starts with self-reflection. So we understand, and we've got tons of data and studies and best practices to look at from other places to inform us as to what are the things that are effective in making change happen. So we've got two things that we have to address, which is culture and context. And when it comes to gender and STEM, I would say things like confidence and a sort of a self-awareness. But in all cases, it starts with a self-reflection, either as an individual or as a division or as a department or as an institution or as an organization, to say, what are we doing right now? What does the culture look like? What do our numbers look like? And what kinds of interventions can we bring in to make a difference? So that's going to vary depending on who you are, where you are. Acadia is very different from my university, from Ryerson University, where 70% of my classes are in science, have racialized students in them. And I don't even think that that's the right word, and I'm not even sure what the right word is, because that's a conversation that we're having to figure those things out. So we're reflecting on those things. So how can we can look at our community and we can say this is what our students look like, but our faculty look very different. So we need to start thinking about that. So we reflect on ourselves. We acknowledge that we have some inequities. We acknowledge that we have a system that has structural, systemic inequities in it, and we seek to remove those, to get those barriers out of the way or deconstruct those barriers. And how are we going to do that? So and that's going to vary depending on where you are and who you are. It starts with being honest. It starts with awareness, leading to education, to actions, and then looking for the outcomes. So that's sort of an algorithm that I often use in terms of how can we think about what we're going to do. Is you start with awareness. We have a problem, so let's be honest about it. We have a problem. And we need to be aware of it. We have some challenges. And then to educate around how can we actually go about addressing those challenges, and then bring in the actions. We often jump from awareness to actions because we want something to happen, but you have to educate on what is it that works and really understand that on the basis of data and evidence, best practices from other places, and then measure the outcomes. So there are different ways of doing that in the university sector. I'm a big fan of the Athena Swan program, which started in the UK about a dozen years ago, has gone to Ireland, it's been exported to Australia, and just in the budget last week it was announced that Canada will seek to adopt it in some form. So that's an institutional, structural, organizational change that can be introduced, and it's going to vary depending on who you are and where you are. I could go on for hours.
Thank you.
So I had a very similar response, education, awareness, and action. So the system is very resilient. And so as soon as we release pressure on it, it's going to spring back. And so we have to continue and being relentless on these actions. But as Imogen said, we need that education and awareness first. So one way that you can become aware is investigate your own unconscious bias. And there is a Harvard Implicit Bias Association test you can take. It's one tool that you can use to assess your own level of unconscious bias. And I think in terms of education, it's really our responsibility to educate ourselves on how minorities are treated. Just because we can't see that they're being treated differently does not mean they are not being treated differently. And so we need to seek out that information. So whether that's talking to somebody who's in a minority situation, like what have you experienced? We really do need to understand that before we can have actions that are going to mean anything. I also think we need to have commitment from the top of the organization. That's really important, that there's a very strong voice from the top on what's important to that organization. And maybe something a little bit just more practical, we talked a little bit about hiring earlier on. And so one example of what we can do in the hiring practice, and of course the hiring practice involves, the description of the job ad, the committee that gets put together who's going to assess those applicants, the CVs have to get analyzed, there's an interview process, and there's a decision, and there's reference letters. All those things have systemic biases on them. But maybe I'll just go to the interview. One of the things we can do is actually integrate diversity into every question we ask. So we can ask a candidate, a group of students has raised an issue of racial inequality in the classroom. What is your response? And then analyze the response. So we can ensure that the people we are hiring are knowledgeable about diversity and racial inequalities. And that's how we're going to start changing the system. So that's one example. We could ask faculty or in an interview or whichever the situation is, who are the role models in your field for LGBTQ individuals or for Indigenous students? Who are those role models in your field? And if the person cannot name anyone, doesn't know any, and doesn't have a reasonable answer, then I think that tells us something, and it tells the committee that's in the hiring who's evaluating those responses something about that individual. So I think if we can try embed diversity into every question during the hiring process, we will get information that is important to our decision later on.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, sure. I will add to this. We talked about being aware that you have a problem and investigate it. Well, often you don't know you have a problem, and that is the problem. And I will refer, so Digital Nova Scotia, we put on for 3 years a program called Women Leaders Fueling the Digital Economy. And what we did was we brought large ICT employers to the table and had conversations about a lack of diversity, that this is a problem. And they said, we don't have a problem. Oh, you do. And then they realized they did through being almost guided and mentored. They weren't thinking about it because everything worked well, everyone looked the same, did the same thing. They were happy. There were certain areas that weren't as happy, but those people weren't asked to comment because, again, it's the leadership that Tamara as well pointed out. So let's not assume that organizations wake up one morning and say, oh, I have a problem, I'm not diverse. It often needs to be brought to their attention, but then also the benefit of diversity and then the lack of diversity, what the issues are and what it will cause long term. So through this 3-year program, we had a few successes. It was hard work, but at least we had successes. I like to focus on the outcomes and the positive, if there was something positive. We achieved pay equity, which has to be mentioned as well. A lot of women are still very much underpaid, also in the IT sector and many other sectors, which is something I'm not very happy about and never will be. The other thing is we talked about job descriptions, that the hiring practices are one, but just even how you word your job description. It's not, again, malicious or intentional. The companies didn't know any better. So they always received applications from primarily one certain group, but it wasn't successful in terms of once they were hired and doing the job, they noticed through our program something was lacking and missing. So as a result, actually, it was reversed. They had, after all, more females in one department and had more successes. But again, to summarize, some people don't know they have an issue unless somebody actually helps them identify and makes them aware. So often, as much as we want to self-reflect and be self-aware, somebody sometimes needs us to give us a good kick and say, you need really to look a little further and look through the magnifying glass. And so that's one advice I would give and like to give: never assume that people know.
Excellent, thank you. Denise?
Going last again. Okay. Pay equity was going to be my number one suggestion for workplaces and institutions. That is a huge issue, and one, from my perspective, that is pretty easy to fix. It's math. We all do it really well. So let's just put that into practice. And the other one is around the recruitment and the language that is used in the job postings, the language that is used within the interviews are different. Cultures that are different than our own allowed to express a response in a manner that allows them to provide the best response possible. Are we allowed to talk about a past, present, and future and bring that into responses? So that is really important as well. And the other thing is I like to challenge, when we look at the senior leadership or the executives of organizations and institutions, is to really challenge them. Are you upholding your vision and mission statement? Are you living your core values? We have these grandiose statements around, all opinions are valued, all people are treated equally with respect, and all of that. And is that really happening? And if it's not, then something is broken. And so I think that we always need to challenge the people who are writing these statements that sound wonderful on paper, but that's all they're worth. Is it being actively lived every day? So that would be the only other thing I would add.
And I think, too, thinking about gender equity in particular, I think that a big issue for so many women, especially if we don't have those equal structures, that partnership at home, is having high quality, affordable, accessible childcare. And we know that more women leave their careers because of lack of that than any other reason. And so I think that that's something that we have to be mindful of.
So that then leads to one other way to actually address systemic barriers, which is legislation. So,
Yes.
and an example in Ontario is, we don't tell people who use wheelchairs to try harder to get up those steps, to lean in. We don't do that. We recognize that there is a barrier to access. It's a very visible barrier to access, but we recognize it's a barrier to access, and we legislate it out. So in Ontario, there's the Access for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which legislates a requirement for buildings to be accessible. And if you're building a building and it's not accessible, you get fined. So legislation is another way to make people, organizations, companies, institutions remove barriers to provide access and opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that in particular, I'll just say, because Mary caught my eye, because she had a student that just gave a wonderful presentation last term about this. Childcare issues don't just affect faculty and positions and staff at universities. They impact a lot of students. And we don't realize just how many of our students have children and how many of those students are leaving university because they don't have that access. And in many cases, they have to pay what I pay every month for childcare, and that's just not reasonable. So absolutely, we have to change the way that we're doing things.
I'm just going to add to
Absolutely.
that. So I wrote an op-ed on the childcare
Yes.
issue a few years ago, and for the students out there, you may
think, like I did when I fell pregnant, that okay, I'm earning quite well, I can afford the childcare. It took 18 months for my daughter to get into a childcare because there weren't enough childcare spaces available. So it's not just the affordability. We don't actually have enough capacity to handle the children.
Yeah, it's estimated there's a 25% capacity to fill the need.
My unborn child was on a wait list without a name 6 months before I had her, and she only got in when she was 18 months old.
Yeah, same.
It's completely ridiculous. And so, you're like waiting for a space, and time is ticking on. And I'm an immigrant into Canada. I have no supportive family system. So what do? My husband works full-time. I work full-time. What do you do? And so it's a real issue. So it's not, Yeah,
no, it is, and it was
so
the same.
Don't believe that it's just
case,
just there. It's not.
Yeah, I would like to add to this again a cultural perspective. So, having lived in Israel, and our daughter was in daycare there. So in Israel, you have at every corner a daycare. So 3 months old, they're very family oriented, and I compare it. So in Israel, you have a daycare in every corner. In the UK, a pub. And in Germany, a pharmacy. And I'm really not, it's my husband who has really lived with me in all these countries, and we were always like laughing about it, that, it's even the way how you find, I don't know, you're looking for an address and all the pubs got mentioned in the UK, and this, and in Israel, it's the daycare to the Blue Bird and daycare to the Blue Ball. It's cute. But what, on a very serious note, I mean, that variety has given access, or has given women access and the possibility to have a choice. Do I want to go back after 3 months, 6 months, 18 months? It's available. And it's nearby because there are so many. So the society and community has allowed for women to be successful in the workforce and to have options and choices. And it is indeed a big issue here, and was even bigger. I used to work at Compaq, now Hewlett-Packard in Munich. It wasn't 18 months, it was 4 years. So one wonders why the birth rate has gone down so much in Germany. Well, there are no daycare, so a lot of families or women, let's say, have decided to no longer have children. It's all connected, but if you dig a little deeper.
And it's really interesting in that Israel is one of the most innovative countries in the world, and successfully translating research findings and science into products and processes more successfully. It's the model that people look to.
Yes.
Well, you create a whole ecosystem, you create a whole culture where you value the contributions of all members of your society.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think that's a good place to end our conversation here. But I invite all of you to continue the conversation upstairs. We have a small reception. There's also a couple of questions on flip charts up there. I welcome you to provide your thoughts. You don't have to sign your name upstairs. And please join me in thanking our panelists for being here with us tonight.